Well, hello and welcome to the Bricks and Mortar Leadership Podcast, where we use God's Word to teach foundational principles to show us not only how to live daily, but lead daily. I'm Kyle Milholland. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. We are going to cover a topic today that on the surface may not seem like a leadership trait or skill, but I can assure you that it is actually one that is a massive leadership trait and skill, and one that needs to be ingrained and instilled in every leader to their core if they want to inspire others and have any kind of credibility and respect with others. And that is the trait of faithfulness or loyalty, kind of interchangeable, similar in a lot of ways. And today we're actually going to look at the faithfulness of Noah, because I don't think we can find a better example in the Bible. There's a lot of examples of someone who is actually faithful, so faithful that God actually chose him to restart all of mankind. It's going to be kind of fun today because we're going to dive into Genesis, but we're going to actually use some of the extra biblical texts that were found in Qumran. And for any of you that know me, I'm a fan of some of the extra biblical texts to help enhance and kind of show this story in a little bit deeper way than what we necessarily get in the Bible. We're going to cover why that is as we go through the lesson today. But we're going to kind of do both of these things as we dive in here. So it's going to be a good Bible study at the same time as a leadership lesson, which is exactly what this show is supposed to be. So it's pretty awesome. So we're going to get into that today. Before we dive into this any further, however, I would love for you guys to head over to my website, bricksandmortarleadership.com. And when you go over there, click on the resources tab, and you can actually check out some of the free resources that we have available for you guys over there. If you actually click on free training, you can see what classes or what sessions we have coming up that you can get into for free and get some leadership training. So again, over at the website, bricksandmortarleadership.com, and love to have you guys check that out. Without further ado, let's get into today's lesson. So as you can see here, I've titled this lesson, Leading God's Way, Faithfulness in the Flood. And kind of like I said in the opening, I can think of nothing better story-wise than we've already been in Genesis, and we've kind of had a little bit of an example of some really bad things that have happened in Genesis, right? We had the fall in the garden, and we had the Tower of Babel and some of those things. We talked about accountability, we talked about communication, and kind of in a negative light. But what we can see in this particular story today are the benefits, the positives, the pros of someone who is acting righteously. While we focused on the unrighteousness of the people in Babel, and we focused on the unrighteousness at the particular moment with Adam and Eve, today we're going to focus on the righteousness that actually is Noah. And inside of this story, we can get a great leadership lesson in faithfulness, in being loyal, in having good integrity. And ultimately, what we're going to see here is leading by example, right? Leading a life that is well-lived, where people can watch us and they really respect us because of how we conduct ourselves and how faithful we are to holding our word and sticking to our moral compass and not deviating off that path. So let's go ahead and dive into the text today. So this is going to be Genesis 6, and we're going to focus on verses 9 through 22, and then we're actually getting into a little bit of Genesis 7 as well. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or Japheth, however you want to pronounce that. Everybody pronounces it different. What we're going to see here right out of the gate, or what we see here right out of the gate, is we see that Noah was chosen, or he is a righteous man, and more righteous than the people around him. And when you really get into the Bible and you start digging into Genesis 6, we can see that mankind had become extremely corrupted, extremely wicked. And there's a lot of reasons that we're going to get into more here in a second of what's going on here. And it's much deeper than what it seems like on the surface. So we're going to go ahead and keep reading and kind of dive in as we get to the next few verses here. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on the earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So it has become so wicked and so detestable that God has actually decided that he is going to pull the plug on the whole thing and reboot and start over with Noah. And if it wasn't for Noah's righteousness, it kind of makes you wonder, what was God going to do? Was he just going to completely just forget about it and wipe us out? Because we can actually see, I think a little bit further back in Genesis 6, that it actually grieved his heart that he made mankind. He was so grieved by it, all the things that we had gone through. Now, it's important to note, and this is the Bible study part of today's lesson. One, we do have Noah's righteousness, and because he had lived a righteous life, and because he had been loyal and he had been faithful to God, thankfully, we're all here today because of it. But we need to kind of dive into a little bit more of the backstory here to really understand, and this is, like I said, the Bible study part of the lesson today, to understand what exactly is going on here. Because it's not just fruit from a tree, and then mankind decided to wake up one day, or a little bit over time, I guess, and become wicked. There's much more going on here, and we can read this back in Genesis 6:4. And when you go back and you read those verses, what you can find, and this is referenced all throughout the Bible when you know what you're looking for, but it's also heavily explained in some of the extra biblical texts, like the first book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees, both of which can be found in Qumran, both of which are actually still in the Bibles today of the Tewahedo Jews in Eritrea and Ethiopia. So those folks have had this in their Bibles, or these two books, for a long, long time. But what we see in Genesis 6:4 is we have angels, or watchers, as the other text will actually refer to them, that were sent down to help mankind because of the fall and kind of help guide us and shepherd us. And instead of doing that, they took a look at the women and they liked what they saw. So they decided that they were actually going to get together and make a pact to usurp God and have offspring with these women, which is exactly what we read in Genesis 6:4. Now, we've lost a lot of this context today because we're looking at everything through the lens of a 21st century Western English-speaking Christian. And we have to remember that the Bible was not written for us. Yes, it's great for us, and we know how to use it. We can pull out life lessons and leadership lessons and everything that we're talking about. But it was actually written for people who were Jews, Hebrews, and all of the people over there. This is their story, not our story. And when this was all written, they had a good understanding of this backstory, and that's why they didn't need to get into a lot of detail, whereas we do not. So when we see this event happen in Genesis 6:4, we need to understand it in a much greater detail because it really paints the picture for the stage that is to come throughout the rest of the Bible. But things had become so wicked and so detestable with the offspring of these angels and women who created Nephilim, and we have started to really destroy everything. We're killing mankind, we're killing each other, we're corrupting all the animals, and by this particular point, the entire earth, as we can read here, was filled with death and violence and corruption. And it actually says in Genesis that all flesh had corrupted its ways. So that is why God has made this decision. He didn't come to it lightly. And as we look around the earth today, we can see how wicked things are now. And God still lets us remain, which is kind of amazing. So you can only imagine how bad it had to have been back in Noah's day. So we continue on. So make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it, and coat it with pitch inside and out. This is how you are to build it. Now, I highlighted this for a reason. God is the best teacher of all when it comes to leadership. And what you can see here is a pretty key thing. He is giving Noah a very specific set of instructions on how to do everything. Here is exactly how you're going to build this ark. You're going to build an ark. Here's how you're going to do it. Here are the direct instructions and details. And he leaves nothing to chance. And that is exactly what we need to do as leaders. A lot of times we struggle with the communication side of the coin, as we've talked about before in previous shows. But we need to be very clear when we're giving instructions to other people so that they can actually follow through and do the job we ask them to do. It makes follow-up and holding other people accountable really difficult if we're very vague in our instructions and we don't provide good details. So this is a really good example from God of, hey, dude, I need you to do this, and I need you to do it exactly the way that I'm telling you, and don't deviate from the plan. And so as we continue on, we see the ark is to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. Now, just as a side note, a cubit is about 18 inches, so you can do the math. Make a roof for it, leaving below the roof and opening 1 cubit high all around. Put a door in the side of the ark and make lower, middle, and upper decks. I'm going to bring flood waters on the earth to destroy all life under the heavens, every creature that has the breath of life in it. Everything on earth will perish. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you will enter the ark, you and your sons, and your wife, and your sons' wives with you. So again, if if it wasn't for Noah's righteousness, this covenant would not be made. So God has literally chosen him to start the entire earth over again, and his sons for that matter. All because of how he was faithful and loyal and righteous and stayed in his lane and followed what God told him to do. You are to bring into the ark 2 of all living creatures, male and female, to keep them alive with you. 2 of every kind of bird, every kind of animal, and every kind of creature that moves along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. You are to take every kind of food that is to be eaten and store it away as food for you and for them. Noah did everything just as God commanded him. The reason I highlighted that is he followed the directions that he was given. He was faithful and he was loyal, and he did exactly what God asked him to do, and he didn't deviate. How often do you do the things that people ask you to do? If you don't, or you don't follow through in the things you say, then you're not a person of integrity, and you're not remaining faithful and loyal to your word. Nothing will destroy your credibility as a leader quicker than those things. The Lord then said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also 7 pairs of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I will send a rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." Now I'm going to share something with you. The reason I highlighted this, there's really no leadership lesson in here. This is really a biblical focus, if you will. I'm ashamed to say that even with all my biblical knowledge and all my years of research and diving into extra biblical texts and really understanding and unlocking the Bible at a deep level, I'm ashamed to say that when I was preparing this show for you guys, that I read something that I'd never read before. And it was the fact that the only kind of animals that were allowed 2 by 2 in pairs, okay, or 1 pair, were the unclean animals. All the other animals were 2 by 2, but there were 7 pairs of every kind. And what do we get, taught when we're children? And what are we teaching children? We're teaching them that he took in 2 kind, a pair, 1 pair, 2 animals, male and female, and they went into the ark 2 by 2. And we're teaching children wrong. I was taught wrong as a kid. When I shared this with my wife when I was preparing all this, she was shocked too. She was like, "What? You got to be kidding me." She thought I was kind of nuts when I was reading this. So I told her the verse, and it's here in chapter 7. You can read verses 1 through 12. And she went in here and she was like, "Holy cow, I've never seen that before." And I found it ironic, or probably not so ironic, that we focused on the unclean animals, and that's what we're teaching the children. That's the only kind that was taken in a pair. We're doing unclean teaching with our children, and we need to teach them more properly and teach them better than what we do. So I just wanted to share that because I thought it was an interesting note and an interesting tidbit into at least my knowledge of, history and what I was taught as a child. And I think there's a lot of these teachings that maybe we need to go back and have more intimate relationship with our Bibles and dive in there and find. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Again, we see Noah's faithfulness. He's doing what he is being asked to do. Without question, he's doing it. Kind of have to wonder, though, what was God's plan if Noah didn't do what he was being asked to do? I'm sure God always has a plan. He would have had some way. Probably would have exercised some grace with Noah and probably put him back on the path. And I think he kind of knew Noah was going to do what, he asked him because he was a righteous man. God typically makes the best choices of all, right? He doesn't leave things to chance a lot of times. So, but an interesting thought. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of unclean and unclean animals, of birds and all creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark as God had commanded Noah. And after the 7 days, the flood waters came on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the 2nd month, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. And rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Now, there are a couple things here that I want to point out that are, again, more biblical study than they are leadership. We're going to come back to the leadership aspect here in a second when we kind of close. Nothing in our Bibles is in there by happenstance, especially when it includes details like dates and specific things that seem minor on the surface, but they are not. They are in there for a specific reason. And this is a fascinating one that you can find if you go and you look in the book of Jubilees, which you can find a PDF copy of. Go ahead and search the internet. You'll find a PDF copy of the book of Jubilees. And I'd encourage everybody to read it. It was one of the books that's been found in Qumran. And it gives you a little bit more insight into this specific date that we're given, the 17th day of the second month. And the reason that that is included in there, and again, we're not going to get this because we are looking at this from a 21st century Western English-speaking lens, right? That's how we're looking at this. This scripture was not written for us, right? It was written for these people and written during the time of these people. And they had intimate knowledge of this, and they understood very well what that meant. That is the exact same day when you read in the book of Jubilees that the fall occurred in the garden, as when Eve was tempted by Satan. So God is drawing parallels to that story here, and he's undoing, in a lot of ways, the beginning of all of the wickedness that started in that moment. So it's very interesting that you can see that is what's going on here. The other thing that I want to point out here is scientific. And we read here, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. And it really puzzled people a long time of what does that mean, the springs of the great deep burst forth, until recently. I don't know if you know this or not, but scientists have recently discovered, and they've confirmed this through multiple different scientific groups, that there is a vast ocean of water underneath the Earth's crust, several miles down, that is actually 7 times larger in volume than all of the water that we have on the surface of the earth. So we can see here, this book that was written thousands of years ago is pointing to scientific evidence that we are now confirming today. And I find that fascinating that the more time goes on and the more science we have and the more that we discover, we just verify the Bible over and over and over again. So I wanted to share that. And if you're not familiar with that story, I encourage you to go look that up. All right, so what are our takeaways for today? Well, number 1, Noah was blameless. Are you leading by example for those around you? That's a great question. Are you leading by example for those around you? Are you blameless? I know you're never going to be perfect. I'm not perfect either. None of us are going to be perfect, but are you leading a life that is actually going to be something that someone wants to emulate, especially as a Christian? We need to be living pretty blameless lives because everyone is looking at us, waiting for us to do the wrong thing so they can point the finger. I wish I could tell you a different story, but that's just the truth of it. And we're going to kind of see a little bit more of this as we get into our other takeaways for today. But leading by example, being faithful and loyal to your principles and to the things you say you're going to do and to the things that people ask you to do, go miles to leading by integrity, and people are naturally gravitated to those who have high degrees of integrity. It's like a magnet, and you will draw people to you as a leader. Number 2, Noah followed the directions he was given. Are you doing what is asked of you? Again, do you do the things that are asked of you, or do you take shortcuts? And again, your children, those who report to you, and those who know you're a Christian are just waiting for you to take those shortcuts, are waiting for you to do the wrong thing. All right. And it's tempting for us as human beings, right? Temptation and sin is always crouching, waiting at the door, waiting for us to, shiny object syndrome. You've heard me talk about that before if you listen to other shows. Waiting for us to reach for that shiny object because it's the easiest thing to grab. Don't do that. Your integrity and your self-worth and everything that you are in you of leading by example and being a loyal, faithful person is more important than the shiny object. Number 3, Noah's family was spared because of his righteousness. Are you leading in a way that brings honor to your team or your family? Are you leading in a way that is bringing honor to them? Are you doing those shortcuts? Are you taking paths that you know you're not supposed to be taking? In the book of James, it says clearly that if we do things that we know we're not supposed to do, that's a sin. Or if we don't do the things we know we're supposed to do, that's a sin. So again, it's all about your integrity. Because in order for people to trust you, they have to know that they can believe in you. Your integrity has to be intact. And when you've broken your integrity and you've broken trust with people, it takes a long time to get it back. So if maybe this message is hitting a little close to home today and you're looking in the mirror and you're asking yourself some tough questions, I would encourage you to stick with it. It's going to take some time to rebuild that integrity that you have lost through this process. But hang in there. You can do it. Well, in the end, I hope this has been interesting, insightful, and good from a learning perspective for both biblical knowledge and also leadership knowledge. And again, please, if you'd head over to the website, bricksandmortarleadership.com, take advantage of the free resources over there. And then also be sure to click to book your free consultation. We'll spend a few minutes together talking about your team's unique challenges, problems, and I can guarantee you I have a solution to fit those. Also, take a look at the masterminds that are coming up on communication and accountability. I promise those are going to be ones you're going to want to take advantage of and take a look at. So thank you guys very much for checking out the show. I'll catch you later, and God bless.